Weddings are supposed to bring out the best in people. At least that's what everyone says, right? Well, not for me. For me, they bring up my worst nightmare, Caleb. It's been 10 years since we broke up, so I should have moved on by now, right? That's what I tell myself. But it's hard. Every time I'm not near him, I think it's fine. I can breathe. I can live without him, and I try so hard to convince myself of this. But the truth is, I never really let go. The breakup? It wasn't simple. It was messy. It was complicated. Caleb's parents died in a car accident the year we started college, and after that, nothing made sense anymore. My parents, being as controlling as they were, tried to change everything about me. They insisted I needed to marry a woman, live a normal life, follow their rules. I ended up repeating my first year in culinary school because of the pressure they put on me. I couldn't deal with it all, so I broke things off with Caleb, even though he never deserved it. Time passed, and life moved on. I started my own bakery a few years ago, something I'd always dreamed of. Rachel, my best friend, helped me along the way, introducing me to contacts, writing articles about my bakery. She was a pastry chef too, just like me. And then there was Maya, a food critic and another friend, who kept me grounded in the chaotic world of food and business. We all ended up at Maya's wedding, held at a recently renovated haunted lake house. It wasn't exactly my dream setting, but when Maya and Rachel asked me to come, how could I say no? I walked into the lobby with Rachel beside me. I spotted Caleb in the corner of my eye standing by the check-in counter, looking just as perfect as he always did. I couldn't bring myself to make eye contact, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my heart was still racing. "Your room is 406, sir," the receptionist said, handing Caleb his keycard. I pretended to be completely uninterested, trying to keep my eyes forward as Rachel spoke to me. "Want to grab some drinks?" she asked, nudging me. I nodded, though I was uncertain. What if Caleb joined us? He was already on his way to the bar with Maya and Leo, Rachel's cousin who I had met once or twice. I followed Rachel, trying to focus on the present instead of the overwhelming swirl of emotions in my head. The bar was so different from my memories. This whole place was different. It used to be a rundown lakeside resort with trees and a park near the water. I always remembered it as a place of carefree summers. Now it was sleek and elegant, still with an eerie, nostalgic charm. "Guess who I ran into?" Maya said as she sipped her drink and grinned at me. "Your old flame, Ethan. He's looking fine as ever." I couldn't stop myself from rolling my eyes. It was the same old Maya, always teasing, always playful. "Your parents?" I asked, cutting her off with a sarcastic grin. She laughed, nudging me with her elbow. "Can you not? You know they'd make the worst in-laws, but they still insist on being here." I half laughed, but my eyes drifted over to Caleb at the bar. He looked just as handsome as I remembered. Despite everything that had happened, I still couldn't stop myself from feeling drawn to him. Suddenly, I heard Caleb laugh loudly, throwing me off guard. "So, how's the new job?" Rachel asked, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. She slid a glass of Cosmopolitan in front of me. I took a sip, the familiar taste of the drink stirring old memories. It tasted like the first time I ever had a hangover, the day after Caleb and I spent an entire summer day drinking together by the lake. "Being a journalist sucks," Caleb said, and I couldn't stop myself from making a face. "I thought you were always into it?" Rachel joked. Caleb shrugged, looking at Maya and Leo with a tired smile. "Yeah, but it's not the same anymore. Honestly, I should have just stuck with cooking." He looked at me like I might have a reply, but I only at my drink, suddenly self-conscious. "Too bad you didn't choose something simpler," I teased, trying to change the subject. His lips curled into a small smile. "I would have made a terrible mechanic. I'm not good with tools." I laughed despite myself. "That's true. You always tried to fix things and made everything worse." But even as we all joked and laughed, I felt the old weight of the past hanging in the air. I could feel Caleb's eyes on me. I wasn't sure if he knew I was still avoiding him or if he even cared. All I knew was that I couldn't seem to break free from the tension that had always existed between us. After a few drinks, I couldn't stand the weight of the memories anymore. "I'm going outside for a smoke," I muttered, pushing back my chair and getting up. I needed a moment alone. I walked through the lobby, barely paying attention to where I was going. The rain had started falling harder than I expected, and the sudden storm hit me like a wall as soon as I stepped outside. The wind whipped around me, and the sound of the downpour was deafening. I barely had time to adjust before I heard someone behind me. "You're really going out there?" Maya called out from the door. I turned, shaking my head. "Yeah, I'm going anyway." But as I stepped into the rain, I had to admit, it wasn't what I had expected. It wasn't a quiet, relaxing moment, it was chaos. The storm had gotten heavier, and I couldn't see anything. I almost stumbled in the dark, trying to find shelter, but I was already soaked. My mind started to race. What had I gotten myself into? As I walked back to the bar, dripping wet, I was met with the teasing faces of Maya, Rachel, and Caleb. "Look at you," Maya said, shaking her head with a grin. "You're a mess." "Thanks," I grumbled, sitting back down. I was trying to focus on the dip and fries in front of me, but my thoughts were elsewhere. The conversation continued around me, but I barely heard it. I couldn't stop thinking about how everything felt like it was spiraling back to where we left off. How even after all these years, I couldn't escape the pull Caleb still had on me. Then, Caleb spoke again, his voice unexpectedly soft. "So you and your boyfriend, you eat like that with him?" I choked on my drink, splattering sauce all over my lap. "What?" I hissed, looking at him incredulously. "What did you just say?" Rachel and Maya both stared at me, but Caleb just laughed, his eyes glinting with something mischievous. "I mean, I don't know if he can handle you eating like that," he said, a teasing smile on his lips. I froze. Did he think I had a boyfriend? Everyone knew I hadn't dated anyone since I broke things off with him. The thought of anyone else was ridiculous. And yet, here he was, suggesting that I was in a relationship. I glanced up at Maya and Rachel, trying to mask my shock. They were staring at me, waiting for a response I couldn't find. "You're so annoying," I muttered under my breath. I stood up abruptly, wanting to get away from the awkward tension I could feel building up around us. The storm raged outside, the howling wind making the walls of the old lake house groan. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something was out of place. Every step I took, every glance I made, seemed to pull me deeper into the vortex of memories that I had tried so hard to bury. I wasn't sure if I was looking for an excuse to leave, or if I was waiting for Caleb to chase me down the way he used to. But Caleb never came after me. Instead, I found myself at the edge of the lake, staring out into the blackness. The rain pelted against my skin, but it felt like nothing compared to the storm inside my chest. My mind was racing, and the only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears. "Why are you out here alone?" The voice startled me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Caleb. His presence was like an electric charge in the air, always making me feel like I was either on the verge of something amazing or on the edge of falling apart. I didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? What did I even want from him? I wasn't sure anymore. My eyes stayed locked on the dark water in front of me, the ripples barely visible in the storm. Caleb stepped closer, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots the only sound between us. "You don't have to avoid me. You know," he said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "I get it, okay? I always understood why you left." I whipped around to face him, my heart tightening in my chest. "You don't understand anything, Caleb," I snapped, my voice breaking through the pounding rain. "You never did." For a moment, there was silence. Caleb's gaze softened, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Guilt, regret, maybe even longing. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the person I had once loved so deeply, the person I had thought I could never live without. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "You know that, right? But I couldn't fight your family. They made it clear that I didn't fit into your life anymore. I never stood a chance against them." I swallowed hard, his words hitting me like a punch. For all these years, I had blamed him. I had blamed him for not fighting harder for us, for not holding on when I pushed him away. But now, standing here in front of him, drenched and vulnerable, I realized something. I hadn't fought either. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, the rain soaking us both, neither of us knowing how to fix the mess we'd made of each other. Finally, Caleb spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I came here tonight to try and talk to you. I wanted to see if we could fix what we left behind. If we could start again. I froze. A part of me wanted to shout, wanted to tell him that it was too late, that the damage was done. But another part of me I couldn't deny wanted to reach out and pull him back into my arms. I wanted to say that I was sorry too. I wanted to tell him that I had always loved him, even after everything that had happened. But I couldn't. I was afraid of the answer. I was afraid that he had moved on, that I had become a ghost in his life. Start again? I asked, my voice shaking. How? After everything, after the way we both walked away from each other? Caleb took a step forward, closing the gap between us. His face was inches from mine now, and I could feel his breath, warm against the cold night air. I know it's complicated, but nothing ever felt right without you, he said softly, reaching out to touch my cheek. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I pulled back, startled by how much I still craved his closeness. I hadn't realized how much I missed him until that moment. I hadn't realized how much I had buried it all, thinking it was better to move on. You're still the same, I murmured, more to myself than to him, still making promises you can't keep. Caleb's expression faltered for a moment, his hand dropping back to his side. I'm not the same, he said, his voice steady. I'm older. I've learned. I can't change what happened, but I can try, if you let me. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign that this wasn't just the same old dance we'd done so many times before, but all I saw was sincerity. For once, he wasn't hiding behind his charm or pretending everything was fine. What if I don't want to try? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He stepped closer, his presence almost overwhelming. Then we stay where we are. But I'm not leaving here without telling you that I'm sorry. For everything. And that I still care. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, the words hanging in the air between us like a thread ready to snap. Do you really think it's possible? I whispered, almost too afraid to ask. To go back to the way we were after everything? Caleb didn't answer immediately. Instead, he just looked at me, his eyes full of something that I couldn't quite decipher. And for a long moment, the world around us seemed to fade. The rain, the lake, the house behind us, they all disappeared into the background. All that mattered was the person standing in front of me, the person who had once been my everything. I don't know, he said quietly, but I am willing to try. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind us. I turned quickly, expecting to see Rachel or Maya, but instead I saw Leo, looking a bit disheveled from the storm. Is everything okay out here? Leo asked, his tone light but concerned. I glanced back at Caleb, unsure of what to say. It felt like the moment had been stolen from us, the possibility of something more slipping through my fingers. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile, just getting some air. Leo didn't seem convinced, but he nodded and headed back inside. Caleb and I stood in silence for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say next. The connection was still there, but I wasn't sure if I could trust it again. Maybe we'll figure it out, Caleb said finally, as if reading my thoughts. Maybe we won't. I nodded, my heart heavy. Maybe. And as we turned to head back into the house, I couldn't help but feel like this was only the beginning. Only the beginning of something newer, the final end of everything we once had.